Hello everyone, this is Dan again. I wanted to make what will probably be my last video about the coronavirus and its effects on my state in Ohio, and just in general, my general sort of impressions on what's going on with the virus, with the response that we see at a lot of different levels, the government, the media, individual people. And I wanted to kind of give my take on what's going on here now. And like I say, this will probably be my last video on this topic. I didn't really intend to make this a short series of videos, but wanted to give a little bit of an update on what's going on because things have changed since the last video that I made. Since July 23rd, so for a little bit over a month now after I'm recording this, there has been a mask mandate in Ohio. So whenever you go out in public, you're supposed to wear a mask, and that's the case throughout the whole state. Now, for a couple of weeks before that, from July 8th to July 23rd, it had been a county-by-county thing where only certain counties, it was still designated at the state level. The counties didn't decide for themselves, but the state said, if the coronavirus is considered to be bad enough in your county, you have a mask mandate. And so that included mostly the most populous counties in Ohio, mostly the city centers. But then after a couple of weeks, Governor DeWine decided that he wanted to make that a mandate for the whole state. And so now, like I say, if you go out in public in Ohio, anywhere, you're supposed to wear a mask. From what I've seen, this has been mostly obeyed. This is especially true for people that go into stores because you have to have a mask in most cases to even get into a store now. The vast majority of people, over 90% I would say, are wearing a mask. Occasionally you'll see somebody not wearing one or with their mask pulled down. Basically, they go into the building and then they take it off apparently. But over 90% of people in stores are wearing a mask from what I've seen. Now, outside of a particular building or a particular place of business, I would say it's closer to 70 to 75% of people wearing masks. People know they can kind of get away with not doing that so much. But most people, the vast majority of people, are still complying with the law from everything that I've seen, at least in my area. Also of note, and I'm probably going to post a graph just from a Wikipedia article that shows the number of new cases per day. The numbers are coming down, or they have come down, I should say, since the end of July and the beginning of August when this mandate came into effect. So for the first half of July, or the first 3 weeks of July really, we averaged around 1,400 or 1,500 new cases of coronavirus a day. And now it's down to about 900, 1,000, somewhere around 1,000 cases a day, give or take. So the numbers come down by, I'd say, about 30 to 35% since this mandate has been passed. Now, we'll see whether this continues over time. It looks to me like the numbers have pretty much leveled off since the beginning of August. So they've come down, but they're not really continuing to come down. Like I say, it's between maybe 800 and 1,100 cases a day that are new, depending on whether it's the weekend or not, because less cases get reported then, it seems like. But overall, the numbers have come down, but they've kind of leveled off again. So we'll see how that continues in the future here, but that's what it looks like to me is going on. Now, the first thing I want to say about this mandate is that it doesn't bother me nearly as much as the stay-at-home order did, because at least people can go out and do things. For the most part, you can go out and take care of your business as long as you wear a mask. It's an inconvenience, it's an annoyance, but you can at least do what you need to do for the most part, unless something is not open because of the virus. But that's not, for the most part, a result of this mask policy or anything like that. That's just individual things being closed, being shut down. So for the most part, people can at least take care of their business and do what they want and need to do. It's just that you have to wear a mask whenever you go out in public and do these things. To me, what the mask mandate shows is that the government still doesn't really have an answer for this. To me, what this mask mandate continues is this sort of attempt by the government and by our leaders to pretend that they have control over the situation when they really don't. So I think it wants the citizenry, the people, to believe that the situation is under control because you're wearing a mask. It wants people to feel like they're doing something to stop the spread of the virus, which they are in the short run. And I'm going to get into the more of the long-term consequences of this policy in just a minute, or what I feel are the long-term consequences. But I think that what's going on is our leaders don't want to be blamed for their lack of ability to really do anything to actually stop the virus. So what they're doing is they're getting people who aren't wearing the mask to take the blame for them. It's like, well, look at these few people, these relatively few people who still aren't wearing a mask. It's their fault that 1,000 new people are still getting this virus each day. It's their fault that this continues to be such a problem. I think that's what's going on here. You can easily blame these people instead of people figuring out that the mask is not really doing anything to change the overall dynamics with this virus. It's like it's still going to continue to spread, just at a lesser rate. Another thing that I've noticed is that people are becoming more hyper emotional on both sides of the mask mandate in particular. You have people who refuse to consider wearing a mask even around older people or people that have certain health issues. People who just say, I won't wear a mask no matter what, which I think is kind of unwise. But that group of people is much smaller compared to everyone else who basically supports everything they hear in the media about we're all in this together. And you still see the whole stay at home, save lives thing, that basically wearing a mask is going to somehow cure this virus. That seems to be what they believe. And really, the solution isn't there. Few people, I think, either way, are assessing the evidence and coming to a reasonable conclusion. I don't see people doing their own sort of risk assessment and saying, okay, if I'm going to be around these vulnerable people and I could have gotten the virus at this get-together or this large gathering, maybe I should wear a mask in that situation. But every day out in public, it's kind of up to other people to protect themselves as well. And if I don't think that I have the virus, maybe I don't need to wear a mask. You don't see people reasoning like that. It's just, oh, you have to wear the mask, or you're not doing your part to stop the virus, or I'll never wear a mask no matter what. You see people being hyper emotional, I think, on both sides, instead of doing a real kind of risk assessment. So one thing worth discussing on why this is, I believe, is the lack of experience that the vast majority of people today have in dealing with a widespread crisis. It has been decades since a major war or famine or major disease outbreak. And I think this is one of the reasons for all the really emotional or ideological based responses. People don't have enough context really to place COVID into. And often don't really have a knowledge of history either. They don't have a knowledge of the history of different pandemics to compare the coronavirus to something different. And so, as a result, people are reacting in ways that don't make a whole lot of sense. They're just going along with their emotions, with their ideological, political views, and they're just not really doing any sort of risk assessment, like I say, for the most part. It's either, I'll never wear a mask no matter what, or, and again, this is much more common, I believe in the whole propaganda that we have to stay home, we're all in this together, we have to wear a mask, somehow this is going to stop the virus in the long run. But of course, again, and this is the criticism that I have with that view, is that that's not really a risk assessment. And the problem with the idea of the mask as a cure is that there is no end game with this current policy for addressing the virus itself. Even if everyone would wear a mask in public for years, even if this was mandated for years, it only really slows the spread of the virus. And we can see this with the numbers coming down only about 30 to 35% in terms of new cases. The result of this policy really in the long run is that it will just take longer for enough people to develop a resistance against the virus, and the situation will drag out longer. Since nearly all healthy people, if you're looking at the data and you see through what the media tells you you're supposed to think, and you actually look at the information available, nearly all healthy people tend to survive this virus, sometimes with no symptoms at all. Because of that, I think the focus should be more on protecting those who are more vulnerable to the disease, while not pretending that having everyone wear a mask, potentially for years, is going to improve the situation. Again, if you don't have a cure for the disease, and no cure is on the horizon, what is the point in going through this whole process of having everyone wear a mask, aside from people feel like they're doing something? People feel like they're taking some sort of action to limit the spread of the virus, and they are over the short run. But the problem is, as soon as the masks come off, whether it's now or a year from now or 3 years or 5 years from now, if we don't have a cure, as soon as people get tired of wearing these masks everywhere they go, the numbers go back up anyway. So there's really not much of a point to this in the long run. It just makes people feel like they're doing something. And it allows the government to deflect blame onto the people that aren't wearing a mask and say it's your fault that this coronavirus is still a thing. Otherwise, people would say, wait a second, the government can't really protect us from this, can they? So maybe we need to blame them, which I don't think is necessarily fair, but we know that that's what a lot of people would do. So, again, I think this is more of a show to pretend like the government can do more about this situation than they can. Eventually, we'll either develop a vaccine for COVID, or people will just get tired of these laws and go back to doing as they see fit. And then you're not going to arrest or fine everybody. So you basically are not going to be able to enforce this law once enough people get tired of doing this. I don't think any of this will change the ultimate outcome, which is that the virus will keep spreading until a cure is found, or until enough people develop either resistance or immunity against this virus from basically enough people in society having the virus. I think it's more a matter of what the people in power want to do to remain in control and the message they want to send. And to, kind of sum up the video here, there's really only two ways to deal with a virus or to deal with something that's really contagious that's infecting a lot of people and causing a pandemic. Either you develop the cure, which we don't have, or, like I say, you have some sort of immunity or resistance against this. And there are people that criticize the idea of herd immunity, and I can understand that. Like, if people are getting this more than once, maybe it's not fair to call it herd immunity, but still, clearly people are making antibodies to fight off the virus, or they wouldn't get over the virus in the first place. So people are developing some level of resistance against this. It's just a matter of how long does it take before the virus is not able to spread as easily from person to person overall in society. And rather than just accepting that that's what's going to happen in the general population, all we're doing is slowing down this process. What is the ultimate point of doing this? And that's what I question. I just don't see how the end result is better unless there's a cure on the horizon. But the ironic part about that is leftists are the ones that want to say, oh no, everything that you see about one drug supposedly being a cure or another drug being a cure or whatever along those lines, they're the first ones to say, the people that have this pro-government, generally sort of left-leaning message that people have to wear masks. Well, if you're saying that there is no cure on the horizon, then what is the whole point of wearing masks in the first place? Again, we're just kicking the can down the road. We're just basically delaying the transmission of the disease from person to person, but we're not stopping it, so it's just going to continue. And again, guys, what I think this is about, more than anything, to sum up what I'm saying, is that you look at something like Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, and maybe you guys have better examples that you could think of than this, but this is the example that stands out for me. Basically, a lot of people think that the government should have protected someone from a hurricane. People who live in a city below sea level should somehow be protected from the government from the consequences of what happens when a big storm goes through your city. And yeah, you can criticize FEMA and you can criticize different levels of government not working together during Hurricane Katrina and the catastrophe that brought about. But do you really think that the government could have stopped most of that from happening? No. But yet you see the reaction. The reaction was, we're going to blame all these leaders at different levels of government for not basically having a solution for a hurricane flooding a city that's below sea level. I mean, that's really an unrealistic expectation, in my opinion. You may have specific criticisms that are valid, but in general, that was going to be a disaster no matter what. But people today, they don't have a good sense of history. They don't really have a good idea of COVID versus other pandemics throughout time because they've never lived through something like this either. And people just don't know that the government can't protect them from this. That's the final point that I want to make. That's what I want to really conclude with, is that people today expect the government to protect them from everything. Your average people out there today, not everyone, of course, but a lot of people, they believe that they are protected from natural disasters. They believe that they're protected from drought, from famine, which is, of course, closely related to drought, from disease, pestilence. They think that they're protected from any sort of danger because people have just not been in a situation, like I've said, where people's lives were threatened on a widespread basis throughout society all at once, either from war or from disease or from drought and famine or anything like that. So people today really think that the government should have a response. They should have a solution to something like the coronavirus. And that's really unrealistic. Like, there's no cure for this. Wearing a mask is not going to do anything except slow what's going to happen down. But still, it's going to end up being either enough people develop resistance against the virus or a cure is eventually found. But people can't deal with that. People can't handle that. And so the government and our leaders and the media, our leaders, of course, have a lot of sway over the media and over the message that's disseminated about any sort of given crisis or event. What they're doing is they're saying, oh no, we can't have this come back on us. And the average person isn't just going to say, well, this isn't really something the government can't do. No, the average person is going to say, why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you making people do stuff so that we don't get this virus? And to me, that's what the stay-at-home order was about to a large degree, and that's what this mask mandate is about. It doesn't really resolve the problem. All it does is, like I say, it draws things out so that the problem lasts longer unless and until you find a cure for the virus. But people don't get that. They want to feel like they're doing something, and they'll choose that feeling over accepting the idea that the government can't really stop this virus until and unless there's a cure. So that's what I see going on, guys. I see this mandate where everyone's supposed to wear a mask in public as, again, it's like, what does this really accomplish in the long run? It doesn't accomplish a whole lot, but it makes people feel like they're doing something, and it gives people a new target. If you're not wearing a mask, you're part of the problem. It's not that the government can't really do anything about this. It's these people that continue to spread the virus, that continue to perpetuate the situation so that football season's getting canceled. One of my friends, just as a very short kind of anecdote, one of my friends from high school who, he's a good guy and there's things that he knows stuff about, but he's really a sports junkie, and he's kind of what I'm describing here. He doesn't realize that the government can't really save you from a disease in most cases. And he is literally blaming people not wearing a mask for football season being canceled. He says, if people would just wear a mask, we would have football, and it's your fault that we don't. That's ridiculous. And it makes no sense when you look at the situation overall for what it is, in my opinion. But that's how people think about this. They need someone to blame, and our leaders don't want it to be them. And I think that's really what this mask mandate is. It doesn't do anything in the long run to stop the virus from being a thing. And as soon as people stop wearing the masks, the numbers go back up. The number of new cases, of new transmissions go back up. But people can't think about that. They can't minimize their own risk. They can't do their own risk assessment because they've never been in this kind of situation, and so they want the government to do it for them. The government doesn't really have a solution either, so it's just a matter of, hey, who can we get to take the heat for this? Because really, until a cure is found, or until enough people have resistance against the virus so that they don't get it so much anymore, this is going to continue to be a problem. But we can't just come out and say that because people will panic. So how do we get the blame to be on some other group? How do we get people to feel like they're actually doing something? And to me, that's what this mask mandate is all about. And like I say, guys, until we actually have a real cure, it's just going to continue to spread. It's just a matter of what rate it spreads at. We're not going to get rid of the virus through this process because of something like a mask mandate. And so I don't see this going well. I think this can go on for years. I think people are going to start to get fed up with wearing a mask, and that's going to start to cause more conflict with the people that are all aboard the whole stay at home and we're all in this together and all this kind of stuff. Those people are going to have, I think, more conflict with the people that get tired of something like this mask mandate. And again, our government, our leaders, they're not going to really have a solution to this. All they can do is try to deflect blame away from themselves. And I think you'll see more of that as well at different levels of government, especially the state level, but really at all levels of government. So that's my opinion on this, guys. Agree or disagree, or if you have another example, like I mentioned Hurricane Katrina, of people thinking that the government should be able to rescue them from a situation where it's not really reasonable to expect that, you can talk about that as well. But again, I'd like to hear you guys' comments on this, but I see this as what I've mentioned. People think that the government should have a solution to this. They want to feel like they're part of the solution, and that's what this mask mandate is. We're not really going to cure the disease because we can't, and it'll just come back, but we need to deflect the blame on people who aren't wearing a mask, and we need to act as if this is a solution so that people don't freak out, so that people don't blame the government for not doing anything about this situation. I don't see a positive end in sight for this. I don't see the mask mandate as really being a solution to this problem, to this virus continuing to spread and continuing to be a problem.